All right, today we're going to jump into a view of faith that might not be what you expect. We're not talking about blind belief or having zero questions. Nope, we're actually diving into these ancient texts to see how faith is really shown as this raw, honest, and yeah, often really challenging relationship.
So let's just get right to it. Let's tackle the big one head on. Is faith supposed to be blind? I mean, is it really about just ignoring the tough stuff, the pain, the doubt, the uncertainty? Well, the texts we're looking at today point to a completely different answer.
This slide really breaks it down for us. Over on the left, you've got the common idea of faith, right? It's all about being certain, having no doubts, kind of being perfect. But then you look at the biblical view on the right, and it's a lot more human. It's not about an absence of doubt. It's about being honest in your doubt. It's less about certainty and way more about wrestling with things. Less about perfection, more about relationship. And that contrast, that's the key to everything we're talking about today.
So, first up, let's look at some figures who absolutely did not hide their struggles. These are people who brought their pain, their confusion, and their biggest, darkest questions right into their faith, instead of pretending they just didn't have them. Let's start with someone like King David. We always hear him called a man of great faith, but if you actually read his prayers, the Psalms, man, they are just filled with raw emotion and even arguments. He does not hold back. Now, you might hear a cry like that and think, wow, he's losing his faith. But that's not what's happening. This is his faith. See, he doesn't push down that feeling of being abandoned. He prays it. He doesn't turn away from God because of his doubt. He turns toward God with his doubt. So it seems like honesty isn't rebellion at all. And then there's Job. I mean, this guy is described as righteous, and he loses everything. And I mean everything, his kids, his health, his reputation, it's all gone. And in the middle of all that grief, he doesn't just sit there quietly. He demands answers. He questions God's justice. And what's so amazing is what happens at the end. After Job has unleashed all of his questions and accusations, God doesn't rebuke him. Instead, God actually says that Job spoke honestly. He says this in contrast to Job's friends, who were just offering up these neat, tidy, and, wrong explanations for his suffering. It's like the raw, painful questions were valued more than the easy answers. So what do these stories really show us? It's that faith isn't dependent on having everything figured out. It's actually possible to hold on to a relationship even when a logical explanation for what's happening to you is just completely gone. Okay, so let's build on that. If faith isn't about having perfect intellectual certainty, then what is it about? Well, this next set of stories seems to suggest that faith is something you do. It's an act of trust, even when you're full of uncertainty. Think about Abraham. He's called the father of faith, but his story isn't one of constant, unwavering confidence. Not at all. It's this long journey that's marked by huge delays, deep questions, and just profound uncertainty. You see, Abraham's faith wasn't really a feeling. It was a series of actions. First, he gets this call to just pack up and leave everything he's ever known with no map, no final destination. Then he has to wait for decades for a promise to come true, and his response through it all is simply to keep moving forward. It's trust in motion, not just a belief he held in his head. Or what about Peter? Here's a guy who's full of bold statements. Right before Jesus is arrested, he makes this absolute promise, just full of courage and conviction. I will never, ever deny you. And yet, just a few hours later, when the pressure's on, his faith completely shatters. Fear just takes over, and he denies he even knows Jesus. Not once, but 3 times. It's a complete and total failure. But here's the thing, the story doesn't end there. After the resurrection, Jesus doesn't just write Peter off because he failed. He goes and finds him. He restores him. He asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" The whole point seems to be that faith isn't proven by never falling down. It's proven by getting back up and returning after you have. So we've seen that faith can include doubt, questioning, and even huge failure. And that brings us to our final section, where we're going to put all these pieces together and see if we can redefine faith as something more like a dynamic relationship.
When you zoom out and look at the whole biblical story, you realize this pattern is everywhere. I mean, Moses argued he wasn't good enough to lead. Jeremiah said, "I'm too young for this." Gideon literally demanded signs for proof. Habakkuk questioned God's justice. And of course, there's Thomas, who flat out refused to believe until he saw the evidence with his own 2 eyes. And the key is, none of them were rejected for being honest. And that's really the crucial point here. Faith isn't about putting on a perfect performance of unwavering belief. The theme we see over and over is an invitation. It's an invitation for the honest, messy reality of our human experience to come into a relationship.
So this brings us to a much bigger, more robust definition. Faith, as it's presented in these texts, is a wrestling relationship. It is not passive. It engages your mind with all of its questions, your heart with all of its fears and hopes, and your will through the actions you take. It really involves your whole self.
So this all leaves us with one final big question to think about. If this is what faith really is, this honest, active, wrestling relationship, what does that actually look like in a person's life? What happens when people are truly transformed by this kind of encounter instead of just being informed by a set of beliefs?